Hey, welcome back, audience, to another episode of What's Up Enterprise, where we explore the latest technology trends across the industries with leading experts from around the globe. Today, I have a very special guest, behavioralist Blake Eastman. He's here to talk about the human factor of technology. There's many routes we could go here, Blake. Your background's so amazing. I think there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. Primarily, I think if you just open up a news feed, it's going to say something about AI behavior and the fears that people have with that. But before we get started, I'd love for the audience to know a little bit about your background. To me, there's stuff I'd love to bring up. Your background's super fascinating, but can you just give us an overview, like what you do and how you got to be able to do this?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Blake Eastman. I own a company called, on a couple companies, but Nonverbal Group is a behavioral research and education company that's all about teaching people really high level people skills, the ability to control your own behavior, the ability to read the nonverbal behavior of others. And then also, I have a strong background in poker. So I conducted the largest behavioral study ever on poker players. It was like our first concentrated use case of showing poker players how to use nonverbal behavior. And I helped the world's best poker players read the behavior of other poker players. And essentially, I've just done a really wide range of things. I consider myself to be not as much anymore, but I used to be like a tapas entrepreneur where I would do a lot of things from recording executive teams and helping them become more effective of working together and evaluating like complicated sales processes and using behavior to do that. And then now still involved in a lot of that, but also building a company that helps machines read human behavior. So looking at a lot of computer vision, specifically around the face and movement to basically deconstruct every single movement on video to raw data and then analyze it and train models.
That is fascinating. I actually haven't talked to you about that, but I have been fortunate enough to actually go through some of the training on the poker side, which is how
Yeah,
we
yeah.
met. And to me, that's just fascinating because I think many times life and business is about poker. It's like really being able to learn and read the people that you're working with. So you're more of an effective communicator and you can build relationships. Doing those things, in my mind, can help people achieve more. And I didn't know that side about, hey, you actually work with these organizations. Can you talk a little bit about one of those scenarios where an organization said, hey, could you come and help us? Why did they ask you and how did you help them?
Yeah, in a bunch of different ways. Usually in the past, I would be tasked with dealing with the joke is like high performance, tough personalities. So people in the organization that are really good at what they do, but maybe a little bit abrasive, maybe rub people the wrong way, and they're difficult to work with, difficult to collaborate with. So I would go in and use video as a mechanism for recording them and showing them what behaviors are creating that impression, and then helping them reverse engineer and transform. But now I did coaching with executive teams. So I'll work with an entire executive team and I'll audit their Zoom meetings and coach them one on one about like how they could lead more powerfully or how they could be more effective at negotiations. And basically, it's understanding where behavior can be used to make processes easier. And yeah, I've done this in so many different and weird capacities over the years, everything from presentations to sales. And now we're tripling down on creating a process for teaching people how to read people at a higher level.
No, and I think this is super valuable. If you look at what I've done over the last 20 plus years is implemented new processes or new software solutions. And often the challenge that we see, it's not that the technology is failing, it's in the adoption or the change management of the
Oh, yeah.
process. And so, be honest with you, looking at all these different projects, I think number one, every project should invest in an element of change management. But what that means is really learning the effectiveness of the team, the way they lead, dealing with challenging individuals. These things are so critical in adoption of change. So let's face it, this is what it's really about is like recognizing that, there are strategies, there are techniques in order to get better. And that's what I also found fascinating. Early on, when I started playing poker, I'm like, yeah, definitely there's strategies, there's techniques and percentages and stuff like that. But when I met you, I realized that you guys are playing the person. The cards are, yeah, they're a factor because they're in the game, but you guys are really understanding how to play a person. And that takes a lot of work. But it's one of those things that, gosh, if we all had an opportunity to be coached this way, I think, especially like on these big projects, these
Mm.
projects often are tens of millions of dollars. And the single greatest failure is in this inability to get the team players to work together at the end of the day. And that's why I thought what you did was fascinating.
Yeah, the
Um,
change management piece is one of those things that a lot of corporate, like everybody knows it's a problem and it's, oh yeah, like how to get everybody to adopt, but people still move forward on these really large scale initiatives without really a robust plan of how it's going to be integrated. And these problems are systemic. So you take a company of 1,000 people, right? They all use a specific type of software. Let's say they've been using like Jira for years, and now they want to transition to Asana. And just a simple like transition of how they collaborate and work. You've got people that love Jira. You've got people that hate Jira. You got people that love Asana. You got people that hate Asana. You've got leaders that tell you, listen, this is the new tool we're using. Everybody use it. You've got other leaders that are going to empower you and make you say, no, this is the reason why it's the best tool. Like it's just so many different opinions and perspectives. And usually it's this forced, we're doing it, but people really aren't on board. And with a lot of this organizational adoption, like for certain tools, it's like you're either all using it or you're not. It doesn't really work effectively when 93% of the organization is using it. And sometimes you see the biggest joke is executives want to roll out these big things, but they don't want to use it themselves. You got to do it if you're going to do it.
They have to, yeah, that's funny. That's true. It's a lot of getting the top down to adopt first. So, what can you tell organizations that I know it's a process and a session. What are some of the key things though that you could help organizations that are looking at change or currently in the middle of adopting new technology? What's one piece of advice that you could give them that they could start with?
And I think the single most important thing is backtest the experience. So every organization has some had adoption of certain things. Usually what you'll find is there's like patterns. So, okay,
Mhm.
we rolled out X amount of software last year. What were the problems? We were really misaligned on timelines. Like we got that wrong. And or there was a lot of friction with the engineering team or whatever it is, because it's likely to occur again. And what happens is usually they just do it the same way. And any sort of ABC, there's a lot of these weird 7 steps for change management. They don't work. They just don't. You have to deal with it at the level of people. So my effective method has been teaching senior leaders how to effectively roll out these programs, how to speak about it, how to pick up on the nuance, how to pick up the frustration. And whenever you're adopting a piece of software, like the argument needs to be made for like, this is going to save the company money, right? But it's also going to make your life as an employee easier. And I think a lot of the times people perceive change as another thing. And that's what happens. Another thing that I have to learn, another workflow that I have to get involved in. Why are we changing this? This stuff works right now. And those conversations don't rise enough to the top to the point of actually having a real collaborative discussion about, does this make sense? Does not. Usually just like, we're implementing this because we're implementing this. And everybody's not on board. So it's going to be painful as you start pulling everybody across the finish line.
Yeah, definitely. I see that on most of the projects. And actually, when possible, I try to have the conversation with the client to leave room in your budget for this, a big success factor. Adoption, change management is super critical to these projects. It's probably as important as the technology itself. Gosh, yeah, hopefully we'll get to have you on more of these. I could see though that some of our clients would be like, hey, how do we get a hold of Blake? We've got this on the line. Just transitioning a bit, this is very interesting what you're working on in terms of computer vision. Because, yeah, I know you do a lot with observation or human observation of people's facial and expressions and lots of different things. I know in poker we talked a lot about, for me, the thing I remember is keep my hands underneath the table. There's no
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, because there's a lot of tell there. So tell me, what are you doing on that side? Can you talk a little bit more about
Yeah.
what you're doing?
So basically, it's my other company. It's behavioral robotics, and we're essentially building a series of products that are built on top of an API that allows machine-aided analysis of human behavior. So this is multi-step process. We solved phase one, which was coming up with robust measurements of deconstruction. So right now we can easily deconstruct what you said using out-of-pocket APIs, but we have our own APIs for measuring every single facial movement. So every time you smile, every time you move, every time you shake your head, every time you glance, every time you move your hand, specifically on Zoom or video interactions like this one we're having right now. So we've solved that, and we're able to now, like, with a high level of fidelity, break down all that into data. And the trick now is, now that we have that raw data, we're building a bunch of models to interpret and learn from those data sets. So an example of this is I work with people that have Zoom meetings. And with a high degree of accuracy, we can usually predict who's going to be problematic from a social perspective based on their lack of facial feedback. So like when other people talk, they don't like glance, or they don't acknowledge, or they don't do any of that. And essentially, we're training machines to look for that as well. This is the thing. A lot of the sentiment analysis stuff on the
Mhm.
internet, like fun video where this person's happy, this person's sad, it's not really grounded in the most up-to-date science. They could smile, doesn't mean they're happy. Somebody could smile for a bunch of different reasons. So the problem is that human perception is so different from person to person that video is the only thing that's actually raw data. So we're using that video to train models, but we're training models in alignment with people's different perspective of things. So for example, like doing
Wow.
this like cool project where we're using the same behavioral data set, but having 9 people train it from their perspectives so that people can see this is how there is no truth. There's no central point of truth. But what there are is like these societal norms. Like in America, for example, you can probably get agreeability on creepiness. Meaning if you were to like look at a video of somebody, everybody's, oh yeah, that person's creepy. So we can reverse engineer and figure out what are the exact behavioral metrics that indicate creepiness in a population. Instead of saying that this person is creepy. They're not creepy. Their behavior is perceived from society to be creepy. And there's a lot of people that really struggle in life because their behavior is not in alignment with society. So a lot of these tools can predict that. But yeah, it's a long life cycle, but it's cool because it'll allow us to predict things instead of me looking through videos. It just speeds up the workflow considerably.
So let me just ask you your own back on this. So a lot of times when we're doing these Zooms, I like to use active screens of certain notes or maybe images or emails because it's live and it's happening right now. How is that perceived? Because I'm always so conscious. I want to look over here because there's a really good note.
So the biggest trick is to own the narrative. So before you do it, say, hey, just so you know, I have a lot of notes and a lot of things everywhere. So if I look around everywhere, I'm not distracted. I'm looking for notes.
Got
That
it.
so now when
Such a
I
good
see you
point.
go like this, I'm like, okay, he's looking for notes. So the big thing with behavior is that as long as you frame the behavior in the context that you want to frame, people will listen to it in that perspective or perceive it from that perspective.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm glad that you're really working with some of this latest technology. I
Yeah.
would love to put it over mine because sometimes I look at myself and go, man, you look really creepy on my own video stuff. It's hard for me to look at myself.
So that's like the whole thing. When you're learning to read human behavior, people think it's all about, oh, is their arm moving or are they squinting? It's not. The first phase is confronting your own biases, your own insecurities, the own way you view the world. I'll never forget, I work with this woman at IBM. This is, I don't know, 9 or 10 years ago. She comes into my office and we're working on a really pivotal presentation. And her presentation skills were horrible by every standard. And we record the video. So she comes in, she does her first presentation. I'm recording her. I'm not giving her any feedback. I'm just sitting in the back of my office recording. And we finish, and I say, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this video for you. And I want you to tell me what you think you like, what you don't like, right? And the first thing she says is, I really need a nose job. And I started laughing. Like, it was funny, right? Because the scope at which she hired me was to improve her presentation capacity. But the way she looked at that video wasn't from a perspective of how to improve her presentation. It was from a perspective of, oh, like, I need to get work done. I need to get a nose job. So she missed the sort of goal. And that's what happens, right? As people. So, for example, for me, when I do podcasts and stuff like that, part of me is always trying to reduce certain vocal fillers and repeating myself and my clarity and working on all these things. I hear them way more than the people listening to me hear them,
I
right?
see. Yep.
But if, let's say, one of you in the audience has been recently told that they say the word,
Then they're going to see it,
then
right?
they're going to see it. Or if I tell you, listen, when you listen to what I'm saying, listen to the amount of times that I repeat or the amount of times I use a vocal filler. You're just going to hear vocal fillers. But if you just hear the presentation, you won't hear them at all. So
Interesting.
human perception could be altered, and it really is boiling down to what matters and what doesn't matter, which is a hard thing to solve for necessarily. But usually, what you're hard on yourself on, it's usually not the best thing to optimize. So what you think you need to improve on is usually not what you need to improve on. Like,
Really
found that, yeah, pretty universally. People will say things to me and I'm like, that's what you think you need to work on? Or it's something else entirely, because you focus on things that don't really matter to the impact of a conversation.
interesting. Yeah, I'll have to learn more about this. I'm really glad that I have you in my corner, actually. This is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. It's a
But
cool
so
place.
in this last 5 minutes, number one, I want to ask, would you be willing to come back and talk to us more
Yeah,
about
of
some of these
course.
things? That'd be
Yeah. Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. I'd
Because
love to.
I've always really appreciated what you do and completely fascinated by your skill set. It's amazing. I love it within the business realm. I especially love it within the poker realm for
Oh,
sure.
yeah. It's very
Yeah. It's pretty
specific use case.
yeah, that's awesome. But I'm really curious just to get your thoughts on what's happening in the artificial intelligence space. There's so many angles, and this is why I think I would need to bring you back. But
Yeah.
one of them is there's this new tool out that NVIDIA is putting out. It's basically for contact gaze. So you can
Yeah.
deep
Gaze
fake
direction. It
yourself, gaze
fixates it.
direction.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that way, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that will help us improve
Um,
or
yes and no. I think so. A lot of the tools that people are seeing right now are not going to account for the nuances of human behavior. So I know the tool you're talking about. If you could modify that tool based on the context of the conversation, then it would get interesting. But the reality is, you never should be really maintaining 100% eye contact ever. It's very weird if all you did was make 100% eye contact. So I think we're
yeah, that is
seeing,
creepy.
yeah, I think once it starts penetrating the level of nuance that's required, it'll be pretty interesting. I think AI is fundamentally changing the nature of work, and the companies that don't see that, if they're not bought into that premise, they're so behind. That's the problem. Just the things that can be done with ChatGPT are quite insane. And once all these APIs get connected, it's just going to change the nature of how we do things for sure. But I think when it comes to human behavior, like deep fake stuff, I would say we're more like 3 years away from scary stuff. The stuff now is just still not there. It will get there quick. It will get there really quick. They're going to have to use some like blockchain technology or some way of validating that a video is a video. Cause
Hey, that's funny. I'm working on something like that because I thought
yeah,
we're gonna need to have some immutable way to encrypt
yeah, we
the
have to.
truth because someone's gonna say, "Hey, this is you," and you're gonna say, "No, here's my private wallet. Here's the data on it. That can't be me." I agree with
Yeah,
that.
that's going to happen. And it's also, as a content producer, what happens when I could deep fake myself and write out a script and it delivers the script in a way that I want. But there's nuance. You get excited in certain areas and you go down. It's so complex. So it's going to take some time for the nuance to be really integrated, but it'll happen. It'll
Yeah,
happen
yeah,
for
I think
sure.
it will happen. Blake, thank you so much. I was super excited when I knew I was going to have the chance to get you on our podcast. I really do want to reach back out and say, can we get you back on to talk about like
Yeah, of
we're
course. Let me
just
know.
now touching base upon your perspective on AI. I think AI is bigger than that. Oh yeah, it's the next biggest thing. I think people are
Yeah.
going to miss the point if they don't see what's really going on. I agree with you so many different ways. So how do people, can they hire you to help their
Yeah.
enterprise?
Blake at nonverbalgroup.com. You can check out the nonverbal group. And we also have a newsletter, nonverbalgroup.com/newsletter that I release every Monday about some of the stuff we're doing.
Yep, I love those. I really appreciate that work that you put in there, and I'm super fortunate to be able to see some of that stuff. So, Blake, it was great catching up. I hope we can do this really soon.
We will.